I'm in the process of doing an upgrade to the bus. So I am getting an inverter, another inverter. So this is going to be a 2 inverter setup, and I'll explain that a little bit further down the line. But for now, the only thing that I've received so far in my order is the controller for it. And so I'm trying to figure out where everything's going to go. I need to have room for this controller. I needed to move my battery monitor, and I need to have space for a switch that I think is going to go right here or right here to switch between the 2 inverters. So today I'm just kind of getting a head start on it by installing the remote into the wall where it's going to go, and making room so that when the inverter finally does show up, I just have to plug everything in. I installed a 200 amp DC breaker, which is where the inverter is going to be plugged in, which is right there for the hot side, and then right here for the neutral side. So that wire goes in the side of the box over here and connects right there, this terminal. And so that is going to be where it draws and charges all the DC power. And it'll make more sense when I'm kind of hooking things up. Okay, so I'm moving onward with the shore power hookup. This is the remote. It's now installed here. It's not hooked up to anything, as you can see. But the next thing is that we're going to have an AC switch to switch between the 2 inverters. This is what it looks like. This is the front face for it. And I think I want to put it right about there. Hello. All right, so I'm down in my basement. This is the AC selector switch that I'm working on. The way it works, basically, is you have 3 positions. Right now it's at 0, meaning that all circuits are open. If I turn it to the left, it activates some circuits back to 0. Turn it to the right, and it activates a different set of circuits. So the plan is basically to have on one side here, this will be inverter number 1, and then over here will be inverter number 2. And you can select between the 2 of them to provide power to the electrical box, but only one at a time would be able to do that. The reason that they're jumped together here is because of the way this switch works. Right up in here, you can see where the circuit connects and disconnects. Basically, when it's turned to one side, everything that's on this side connects to the other side. So turn it to the left, and then this circuit is closed. And then turn it to the right, and this circuit is closed while this one is open. So I have them jump together because they're both going to be feeding the same circuit. I have this cable that's going to run to, this is 10 gauge wire, that's going to run from the switch on the jumper side to the breaker box. And that way, you're basically just selecting between which one is sending power to the breaker box. And neither of them can kind of feed back on each other. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and wire this up. Alright, so this is what I'm working with. We've got the ground, the neutral, and the hot all wired into one side, and then the jumper connecting to the other side. Let's say this is the old inverter. The old inverter will be connected here. When I close this circuit, power comes through the wires and into this circuit, which goes to the breaker box and supplies all of the outlets. When I switch it the other way, this circuit is broken, and here the new circuit from the new inverter connects to the wires and supplies the breaker box. There's no path for the old inverter to connect to the breaker box. So there's no way for either of them or both of them to be working at the same time, which is good because you could end up cooking your inverters that way. So now this is ready to go be installed into the bus. All right, so the switch is screwed in. You can see it on the other side. And now it's ready to be attached to the new breaker panel. Okay, I know that this is a big mess of wires, but try to look past that for now. This is the switch right here, and you can see the conduit, which is this. This is the 10 gauge wire, runs up and over and into the electrical box. And so I'm going to attach these to the input terminals on the electrical box, and from there we can attach the outlets. Okay, so I've got the input wired into the box. There's no breaker yet. I am not an electrician, so probably shouldn't take my advice, but I feel pretty confident that this is correctly wired. So let me know in the comments if you feel otherwise. I am going to now continue on to the outlets. Okay, so this is the GFCI outlet. It is now attached via Romix right into the breaker box, and I've attached a 20 amp breaker to the electrical wire, which I'm now going to install into the slot. This takes a little bit of strength and leverage that I may not have from this position. There we go. All right, and now that breaker is connected. Still no power attached to it yet though, because we have to attach the inverter to the switch that supplies power to the breaker box. The real step one, just in case, is to install the fire extinguisher ball in the electrical box, just in case any sparks or anything create a fire. Hopefully that won't happen, but here we go. So step one, let's turn on the breaker for the inverter. So now the inverter can get power, and now we turn on the inverter, and so we have power going from the inverter out into the AC selector switch. So now we have to select the proper switch to see if we turn on the breaker. So we turn it to 1, and there's nothing. Oh, another thing that we forgot. We have to turn on the breaker here. Still nothing. So let's go back to 0. So no power is being supplied. Let's go to 2. And you can see the electrical panel is on. So my circuit is working. Now let's see if the GFCI works. It certainly does. Hit the reset button. Okay, so we know that number 2 is the selector switch for the old inverter. So when I put in the new inverter, it will be on number 1. I haven't seen any sparks, nothing smells like burning. I think this is good. So that is half of the setup done. All right, so I just went outside and did some measurements for my shore power hookup. This is going to go on the exterior, and this is what you'll plug into at RV parks. But this is basically just a little outlet that attaches to the outside. And I think, according to my measurements, that I got really lucky, because this thing should fit perfectly in this spot between where there's this gap here. Okay, so I eased in the hole saw and finally poked a hole after getting through all the insulation. So now, the moment of truth. Let's see where that hole is on the other side. Ooh, right there. That might just be perfect. Oh, I think that's gonna be perfect. Okay, so we did get really lucky with where the exterior outlet's going to go. It should be a pretty straightforward install, which should save me several hours. So I'm going to go put on my safety gear, and then I'm going outside and going to cut a hole into my nice paint job and install this thing. Okay, so I've pre-wired the receptacle, and now I'm going to install it first by threading the wire through the hole. Then I'm going to attach it with sheet metal screws at these 4 points on the outside. Alright, there you have it. Plug installed outside. Probably going to put some silicone on the inside to seal it up a little better. But that's it. Okay, so let's take a quick look at what we've got here. This is the Magnum Energy MS2000 inverter charger. It has an input and an output for AC power, and then 2 terminals for DC power. Over here we've got a big port that came, and it was open, and I have the port somewhere, the cover for this somewhere. But this is the AC electrical box with a little code on how to wire it up. And then the wires in here are just all on twist nuts and loose, and we'll figure that out when we get to it. There's a little key here that shows that it is connected. These are the spots where you connect the remote and battery temperature sensor. This one came with a battery temperature sensor, even though it said on the website it wouldn't. So I already bought one and installed it. Now I have 2. That's wonderful. This is the remote that it's talking about, so I'll be connecting that to this port over here. These are both the DC terminals for connecting to the battery bank, and then it also comes with these terminal covers so that they're not just exposed out there in the electrical box. The whole thing is on this pretty heavy-duty mounting bracket that I'm going to use to put it up in the place where I kind of set aside some space. And overall, this thing is pretty freaking heavy. I'm not exactly sure how heavy it is, but it was a little bit of a struggle to get it into the bus. So I might have to reinforce the mounting spot where it's going to go, just to make sure that it's extra able to handle the weight. Alright, the first thing I do for the inverter was to put it in place. This is where it belongs, this is where it's going to sit. This is just out of the way of the curve of the door, so that we won't be getting any kind of interference from hitting that. So now it's time to start wiring it up. So I am starting with the AC output wire that goes to the breaker box, or actually goes to the switch and then to the breaker box. So that one goes in the upper left corner one, as per the instructions, and it comes out inside the box right there. And so I'm going to cut this wire and splice it in according to the instructions that are on the manual. Okay, so according to this thing, the blue wire is the AC hot out. So this is the blue wire. It's going to connect to the black because that's the hot out. And then the white and black wire is the neutral out. And then this is obviously going to be our ground, which is this green wire. So we got to free the green wire. Scissors. We will start there. So I've got wire nuts. So let's start with the hot. We've got blue. Actually comes with a wire nut on it, which is nice. Probably reuse that. So expose the blue, and we are going to connect it with black here. So as an added measure, I always like to wrap my twist nuts with electrical tape. All right, so that's hot out. We'll continue on and do neutral out. So what is neutral again? It is white and black. This one. Pretty good. So the ground I'm going to leave off for now because I still need to get the ground from the input wire in here. And then when I do, all three of those are going to be tied together. Okay, so the next plug, or next bit of wiring we got to do is the plug itself. So the other day I installed the electrical plug, the 30 amp electrical plug with the 10 gauge wire that comes out and around and goes nowhere. So now we know where it needs to go, right inside that port, and we'll be connecting it to these two wires right here, hot, neutral, and then that common ground that we have in the box. Okay, so now I'm going to shove all of this wiring into this case neatly and carefully, being careful not to unscrew anything or overly stress out any of the wires. They are pretty stiff. 10 gauge wire is pretty stiff. And that's in. So now it's time to put the AC cover on, and then we move on to the DC connection. Warning, electrical shock hazard. Cool. All right, so the AC is connected now for the input and the output on the inverter, but the next piece of the puzzle is the 12 volt DC. So these are the DC terminals. This one is labeled positive, this one's labeled negative, and they need to be connected to the batteries. The positive side needs to go through a breaker. Luckily, I've already installed a breaker. So we've got that breaker right there, and that wire that it's connected to is attached to the positive terminal of the battery bank in here to help with charging and discharging. So the positive terminal here needs to reach all the way to the positive terminal there. The negative terminal here just needs to reach to the negative bus bar here, which is already on 2-aught gauge wire, the big thick wire that I'm going to be using for this installation as per the instructions and my particular install. You might need to go a little bit bigger depending on how you're wiring this up, but since this is all open air, very short run, this is all I need. I shouldn't say this is all I need because this is a lot of copper. You put the terminal on Making sure all the strands get in nice and careful. And then I've got this piece of shrink tube that's also going to slip over after we do the crimp. So, got this. Julian, can you hold this? Yeah. Can you hold that down? Yeah, keep it on the thing. Okay. All right.
Blood vessels.
Yeah. Just got to make sure it's tight. All right.
Seems better.
That's better. All right. So then we have the heat shrink. You plug that into the electrical outlet. That's one. 3 more to go. Why?
Just kidding.
Okay, so from the battery box we have the positive hot wire DC going into this breaker box, 200 amps, that goes up to the positive terminal on the inverter charger, and then the negative terminal comes down right here and connects to the negative bus bar, and then is on the other side of the shunt so we can monitor how much energy it's using. And then the AC comes out of these 2 terminals. We wired those up. One of them goes to the AC switch, the other one goes to the plug outside. Everything should be ready to go. I'm going to put these terminal covers on. They go right here first, just to kind of, safety. And then I think we are almost ready to go. All right, the last couple things that we have to do are to attach the remote, which is right here. That's what the front of it looks like. There we go. And then we have the temperature sensor right here. That also goes in. And there we go. Now we are ready to start doing some tests. So I'm going to clean up a bit and then we'll get to the fun part. All right, everything's set up. Did a little bit of cleanup to make it a little easier to move around in here. So we can go ahead and shut off the old inverter. So now let's get the new inverter up and running. So step 1, we're going to come down here to the breaker and we flip the breaker on. And then somewhere up here, there's an LED indicator with a power on-off switch. So we're going to go ahead and hit the on-off switch. And it looks like we've got blinking, which is a good sign. It's making some kind of ticking sound in there too, so we'll have to figure out exactly what that is. First, let's look up that blinking. When AC power is not connected to the inverter, indicates the inverter is searching, conserving power, and waiting for a load to be turned on that meets or exceeds the search watts parameter 5 watts. It is searching for an AC power source that's greater than 5 watts. We have to switch the AC provider switch over to the new inverter, so let's do that. Okay, so we've got some power. It's blinking right now because it's looking for a minimum amount of watts, and I think I'm going to change that real quick here. Let's change that, the search watts, to off, and now it's stopped blinking. So now we've got a solid green light inverting. Let's take a look at what we've got going on with the battery here. Using 1.6, or no, we're gaining 1.6 amps from solar. Let's shut off the solar panels for now. All right, so we're using 2.4 2.4 or 2.9, 2.8 amps, or 100% full. 13.9 volts coming out. So there we go. And as a side note, this thing is showing that we are grounded. Just curious, I'm going to hit this, and the GFCI works. That's nice. So the next thing we're going to do is see how the charger works. So this is the new plug that we just installed, and I'm going to be putting this little adapter on that allows me to plug just a standard 15 amp plug into it, because I don't have 30 amp shore power. All right, that's plugged in. Let's go check it out. So let's go ahead and turn on the power. It says it's charging, but I don't see any power coming in just yet. Let's give this a shot. Well, that doesn't change any of the battery, so it's not pulling from the battery right now. It's definitely pulling. Oh, and look at that. Suddenly it's charging at 14 amps. Wild power swing. So. Float charging, not bulk charging. Well, that makes sense because we are 100% full right now. But that's cool. So the charger works. That's great. Now what I've got to do is set up the inverter for the exact batteries that I have, which are flooded lead acid batteries that charge ideally at 14.8 volts. And it looks like we're only getting 13.6, but again, we're in float right now. So I'm going to go through the manual on the remote, and we'll see what we can find for settings there. On the battery type, I changed it to custom because the default settings that it has for lead acid batteries, which right here, flooded at 12 volts, it absorbs at 14.6, which is too low for my batteries. In order for my batteries to be fully charged, they need to be at 14.8 volts. There's a couple of settings I had to change, and I looked it up online to be sure that I got the exact voltages that the batteries required. So in here we've got 14.8 volts for the absorbed charge, 13.5 volts for the float charge, which was one of their settings, and their last setting was 16.2 volts for equalization. Unfortunately, this charger doesn't go up to 16.8 or 16.2 volts, so I just maxed it out at 16 volts. I could turn it down, can't turn it up any higher than that. That's fine. I mean, overall, it's going to get up there. It'll get the batteries to where they need to be, and the solar can handle the rest. I also turned on the solar to see how they would interact with each other, and right now we're getting enough solar that it looks like it's not putting out any amps. The solar is just taking over and doing all the work right now. So even though it says it's charging, it's not. You can see 15 volts, 0 amps. 0 amps are what's actually being put out. I can change that by simply shutting off the solar power, and we see, oh, we're using some energy, and then I've played with it a little, it takes a second, but there it goes. Now the charger is taking over and pulling some amps from the power cord, shore power, and charging the batteries for me. So the last test I want to do is a test of how much power comes out of the inverter. So I went outside and disconnected from shore power. You can see that the sun went. It got a little bit of cloud cover, so the amps went down a little bit, but still charging off the solar. And if I am thinking about this right, it should pull from the batteries, and we should see the battery monitor indicate how many amps are being pulled. So here we go. And it shoots right back up. So yeah, this thing uses about 10 amps, I think, when it's going the maximum. So now what I'm going to do is hold it down for about 30 seconds, and we'll see if it trips anything, because the old inverter would definitely trip after 30 seconds of this drill going, and I want to see that it will go longer than that. So here we go, 1 minute. No sweat. So we've definitely got more power going through the system. This will come in handy later, I'm sure, because I can. Let's see if that changed our. Nope, still 100% full. If I ever wanted to use power tools off the grid, I've got that option now. So I feel pretty good about that too. So if anybody needs help building their Skoolies out in the middle of the desert, you know who to call. Alright, so I've been playing with the inverter charger, putting it through its paces, messing with some settings, and I think I've got it the way I want it now. So I shut off the solar, I'm letting it do its own thing, letting the charger take over, and just kind of watching how it goes, making sure nothing goes wrong, and everything's good. And so that's it. Shore power, new inverter to switch. So we have the option of the other inverter into breaker box, into outlets. Oh, and we also have the new DC connection from the new inverter that goes into the little breaker right here, 200 amp breaker, which feeds into the battery box, so that power supplied through the charging can be pushed into the battery box, and it goes the other direction as well. When it's inverting, it will start taking energy from the battery box and turning it into AC power that we then select on the AC power switch to turn on all the outlets. Whew! Alright, so a lot of stuff. This is a big upgrade. I'm very excited about it, and I will probably have some more updates later when I have more experience with the setup. Nowhere to sit. Too many tools. Aww.